There's a moment quiet, deep, and unforgettable when someone walks into your life and nothing feels the same again. It's not fireworks or obsession, it's peace, and yet the mind still questions, how do I know they're meant for me? This question keeps you up at night, doesn't it? But the truth isn't hidden. It reveals itself in ways the world can't teach, only experience can. In this speech, I'll show you how to recognize the signs that don't lie, how to tune into the part of you that already knows the answer, and why ignoring it may cost you more than time. You may walk through your day, see thousands of faces, pass by hundreds of moments that seem ordinary, unshaped by meaning, and then it happens. You meet someone and something inside you becomes still, not because of what they say or how they look or how the world perceives them, but because something beyond thought has whispered, yes. That whisper is not imagination. That whisper is real. It is not loud. It does not scream for your attention. It simply is. A calm knowing that does not require proof, time, or logic. And in that stillness, you feel it not in your head, but deep, somewhere beneath the surface noise of your thoughts. And though the world outside you may be full of contradictions, that inner signal remains consistent. That is how you know. You don't have to convince yourself. You don't argue with it. You don't list pros and cons or weigh emotional risks. In fact, when someone is truly meant for you, the mind becomes very quiet. All the usual chatter, the what-ifs, the fears, the history, the defenses, none of it feels relevant. Why? Because that connection was not born in your thinking. It was recognized by something far more constant than thought. This knowing doesn't beg for attention, it doesn't demand, it doesn't urge you to rush. It just exists, fully formed, like it's been waiting to be noticed all along. And once you feel it, even for a moment, nothing you experience after feels quite the same. It becomes a point of reference for everything else. You may still question it, you may still resist, but the knowing remains untouched, unchanged. You may ask, but how do I trust this sense if I've been wrong before? And the answer is simple. You were not wrong. You didn't misread the signs. What happened was that you listened from fear, not from presence. And when fear speaks, it mimics the voice of truth. It mimics the calm. It mimics the urgency. But if you listen closely, you'll notice the difference. One arises from lack, from grasping, from the fear of being alone. The other arises from fullness, not because something is missing, but because something within you is finally being matched. This certainty is not excitement. Excitement is temporary, it flares, it fades. This certainty is quiet, like a truth you forgot you knew, like a memory that never happened, but somehow lives inside you. When someone is meant for you, you don't feel possessed by them, nor do you try to possess them. You don't crave their attention like oxygen. You breathe easier just knowing they exist. This isn't fantasy. This is alignment, and it doesn't mean life becomes a fairy tale. It simply means that within you, something becomes ordered. And once your inner world is ordered, your outer world begins to reflect it without effort, without chasing. You begin to walk differently, speak differently, decide differently, because you're no longer waiting for confirmation from outside. You've already received it inside. I'm not speaking to the part of you that overthinks. I'm speaking to the part of you that remembers. You've felt this before, maybe for a moment passing, fleeting, and perhaps you didn't trust it. Perhaps you pushed it away, or perhaps you tried to chase it. But it doesn't need to be chased. It only needs to be honored. When you trust the knowing, you don't have to make sense of it to anyone else. You don't even have to explain it to yourself. It's the moment your mind goes silent and your body leans in without fear. The moment your heartbeat slows, not speeds up. The moment their presence feels like a home you never built, but somehow belonged to all along. That's what I'm talking about. And if you haven't felt it yet, don't worry. You haven't missed it. You don't have to go looking. You only have to become still enough to feel it when it arrives. The world has told you to seek chemistry, to seek sparks, adrenaline, flutters, but those are noise, fireworks, beautiful, temporary, distracting. What you're looking for isn't a spark, it's a resonance, like two notes in harmony that were never out of tune, just played at different times. When someone is meant for you, their presence doesn't light you up, it settles you down. It makes you more of yourself, not less, and you feel it right away, not because they say the right thing or do the right thing, but because something within you recognizes something within them. It doesn't feel like magic. It feels like truth, like gravity. You don't have to climb or run. You're simply pulled, not by desire, but by clarity. This is the part most people miss. They look for signs in the outer world, in timing, in coincidence, in compatibility charts and matching interests. But none of that means anything unless it's confirmed by the stillness inside. And here's what's even more powerful. This knowing doesn't fade. It may be challenged. It may be buried under layers of doubt or external pressure, but it does not go away because it didn't come from the mind. It came from the core, and the core does not forget what it has recognized. It can take years to understand this, or it can take a second. It doesn't matter. Time has no authority over truth. The recognition may happen instantly, or it may unfold slowly like the petals of a flower that only opens in sunlight. But when it happens, you don't rush it. You don't question its pace. You trust that what is meant for you does not require performance. It does not require audition. It only requires that you remain real. So, what is this knowing, really? It is the echo of your own wholeness. It is the reflection of what already exists within you, finally mirrored in another. You are not finding someone. You are remembering what you already knew but forgot. And when that person shows up, not as a savior or a fantasy, but as a mirror and a companion, you will not need to be told they are meant for you. You will already know, the way you knew when you were in danger before danger appeared, the way you knew when something was wrong, even when everyone told you it was fine, the way you knew when you were on the wrong path and had to turn around, even when it made no sense. That knowing, that compass within you, it doesn't break. It just gets buried beneath noise, distraction, and fear. But it's always there. And when you meet someone aligned with your journey, that compass lights up again. It points not with urgency, not with force, but with certainty. You may try to ignore it. You may try to rationalize your way out of it, but you'll come back to it again and again, because it doesn't come and go with mood or emotion. It stays because it belongs. So don't look for signs in the sky. Don't look for validation in what they do or say. Look inside, sit in silence, observe what happens in their presence. Does your body tighten or does it relax? Does your mind rush or does it become still? Do you feel the need to perform or the freedom to be? This knowing does not ask you to believe in fairy tales. It asks you to remember what real feels like. And if you've felt it even once, you'll never be satisfied with anything less again. Not because you're picky, but because once truth is seen, illusion loses its power. You are not here to search endlessly. You are here to recognize, and recognition is immediate. It is not learned, it is remembered. When you know, and the only question that remains is, will you trust what you know? Will you follow the signal even when the mind argues? Will you allow the stillness to guide you more than the noise? Because in that stillness, that deep, unwavering yes, that place where logic has no authority, that's where alignment lives. And when you feel it, don't ask why. Don't ask how, just pause and listen, because some truths don't need to be understood. They only need to be honored, because some truths don't need to be understood. They only need to be honored. And when you honor that stillness, that recognition, something remarkable begins to unfold without force, without formula. You start to notice how certain connections don't need construction. They don't require scaffolding of rehearsed words or carefully designed steps. They move on their own, as though the meeting had already happened long ago, and now you're simply catching up to it in time. That's the second sign. It doesn't feel like starting. It feels like continuing. You see, when someone is meant for you, the connection doesn't need your effort to exist. It exists before your mind begins to analyze it. You're not building rapport, you're remembering comfort. You're not building chemistry, you're resting in ease. And this ease isn't shallow or fleeting. It's not born from similarity or shared opinions. It's born from alignment, and alignment doesn't need maintenance. It doesn't rely on being impressive. It thrives in what is natural. Have you ever spoken to someone and you weren't trying to be interesting, but they leaned in anyway? You weren't trying to sound wise, but they understood you before your sentence even finished. That is not charm. That is resonance, and resonance is not created, it is uncovered. Just like the inner certainty we spoke of before, this effortless connection is already there before you even speak. And once it begins to unfold, you realize it's not something you're directing, it's something you're allowing. Think of all the times you forced conversation, all the times you thought, what do I say next? How do I keep them interested? That is not connection. That is survival, that is you shaping yourself to be chosen. And when you're doing that, you've already abandoned your center. You've stepped out of being and into performance. But with the one meant for you, you return to being. And in being, you realize there's nothing to perform. With the right person, even silence speaks fluently. You don't need to fill every gap. You don't need to impress with stories or ideas. The pauses are not awkward, they are peaceful. They hold presence. You can just be, and they can just be. And together, it feels like life takes a deeper breath through both of you. Now notice this. When you are around someone not meant for you, you feel the need to speed up. You try to keep attention, hold space, create interest. You are constantly thinking, what now? What next? But when you're with someone aligned, you slow down, you sink. You are no longer orbiting them. You are anchored together. That's what effortlessness feels like, not laziness, not neglect, but peace. A peace that doesn't demand but still holds strong. In fact, you don't even question if you're being understood. You are, because they're not just listening to your words, they're hearing your energy. There is no tension in your communication, no subtle anxiety driving your responses. You don't have to prepare your next move. The moment carries itself. It leads both of you without pressure. And here's something even deeper. When the connection is true, time becomes irrelevant. Whether it's minutes or hours or years, you never feel like you're running out. You're not measuring progress, you're experiencing presence. You don't count the number of conversations, you remember the feeling of them. Because that connection, when effortless, is not about the content of your talk, but the space it creates. A space where both of you are free. You feel like you've known them, and maybe you have in ways that words will never explain, because the soul doesn't speak English or Arabic or French. It speaks frequency. And when someone is meant for you, their frequency doesn't clash with yours, it dances, not to entertain, not to seduce, just to be. It's also where trust is born, not from promises, but from presence. Because when the connection is effortless, you know they are not wearing a mask, and neither are you. There's no negotiation of identity. You don't have to shrink or stretch. You meet as you are, and because of that, you trust not just them, but yourself in their presence. You trust how you feel, you trust your own energy, and when you trust yourself, there is no confusion. Effortlessness shows you something that effort can never provide: authentic rhythm, a natural pace that doesn't need deadlines or checkpoints. You don't rush to define what it is, you let it unfold, because you already know. What is real does not require force. It simply requires permission, permission to exist as it is, and the connection. It expands not because you push it, but because you don't resist it. You don't ask, "Where is this going?" Because deep down you already know where it comes from. It's not going anywhere, it's being here. And it stays here, moment after moment, without losing itself. That's how you know you're not in a transaction. You're in a flow. You're not exchanging roles. You're revealing truths. This is why people often miss real connections. They're looking for spark, for pursuit, for grand gestures, but they overlook the most important thing. Can you just sit with them and breathe? Can you feel them without speaking? Can you share a space and not feel the pressure to impress, fix, or be needed? Because that is where truth lives, not in the noise, but in the still rhythm of effortless presence. I must say this clearly: effortless does not mean perfect. There will still be contrast, differences, even discomfort. But it's never threatening. It doesn't destabilize the core. The current still flows beneath the turbulence. And the connection doesn't ask you to be anyone other than who you are, even when you're vulnerable, even when you're not at your best. Especially then, because the right connection makes space for your wholeness, not just your highlight reel. It's in that space that real intimacy forms, not from touching hands, but from touching essence. And when someone touches your essence, there is nothing left to protect. There is nothing to perform. You simply are, and being with them doesn't cost you anything. It returns you to yourself. So if you've ever wondered why some connections feel like climbing uphill in the wrong shoes, why every conversation feels like work, why every silence feels like distance, it's because your soul is trying to tell you, this is not where you rest. This is not where you exhale. But when you find the one meant for you, you'll know, because you'll finally breathe. And not because they rescued you, or completed you, or understood you perfectly, but because they required nothing from you except your truth. And your truth, it never struggles to connect. It either flows or it doesn't. And when it flows, you'll feel it in every word, every pause, every glance, and every moment you spend saying nothing at all. This kind of connection is rare, not because it's impossible, but because we've been taught to look for something else. We chase the dramatic, the intense, the complicated, believing effort equals value. But effort is only needed when something isn't aligned. Alignment, it needs your presence, not your struggle. So I invite you, pay attention to how you feel before, during, and after being with someone. Are you energized or drained? Are you grounded or scattered? Do you feel like yourself, or someone you invented to keep them around? Because effort can create illusion, but ease only reveals truth. And when you finally experience that truth in the presence of another, you won't just feel connected, you'll feel whole. Not because they complete you, but because the connection reflects the part of you that was never missing. This is how you know, not through words, but through what the words don't need to explain. Not through promises, but through the peace that needs no promise to exist. When someone is meant for you, the connection doesn't arrive with fanfare. It arrives like breath, effortless, constant, and essential. It arrives like breath, effortless, constant, and essential. And from that breath, from that natural, flowing connection, something else begins to awaken. Not just comfort, not just familiarity, but growth. A growth that does not pull you away from yourself, but draws you deeper into your center. It is here the shift happens. You realize that love, when true, does not stunt you. It does not ask you to shrink, nor does it demand you fit into a shape that no longer honors your soul. Real connection becomes the soil in which both of you grow together, distinctly and powerfully. This growth is not competitive. It is not one partner ascending while the other clings below. It is not the kind of dynamic where one becomes the teacher and the other the perpetual student. No. When someone is meant for you, evolution happens in both directions. Not always in the same ways, not always at the same pace, but always toward the same light. The beauty of this kind of bond is that it does not require agreement on every subject. In fact, your differences are the very instruments that sharpen one another. But the sharpening is never violent. It does not wound, it refines, because there is mutual respect not just of opinions, but of inner paths. You grow, and they don't feel threatened. They grow, and you don't feel abandoned. Because deep within, you both know, expansion is the point. It is a tragic misunderstanding that people lose themselves in love. That only happens when love is mistaken for possession. But when love is real, it becomes a mirror not of who you used to be, but of who you are becoming. You begin to see yourself clearer through them, not because they define you, but because they reflect the parts of you that were waiting for expression. Your laughter deepens, your silence strengthens. Even your pain, when it rises, is met not with dismissal but with space. This is not a fairy tale. This is inner work made visible through shared presence. You don't just grow when it's convenient, you grow even through the challenges. Because real connection doesn't run from contrast, it transforms through it. You stop seeing tension as threat and start seeing it as opportunity. Opportunity to listen more deeply, to love more consciously, to communicate more honestly, and the most profound part of all, you don't have to grow in the same way or even on the same timeline to be aligned. What matters is not the similarity of the path, but the direction. Are you both leaning into truth, into clarity, into healing? Then you're growing together, even if your steps look different. The right connection creates space for that difference without judgment. There may be moments when one of you struggles, when one retreats, when fear whispers louder than clarity, but even then, the connection holds a silent invitation. Return when you're ready, not because the other waits passively, but because growth is not forced. It is invited, it is supported, and it is witnessed, not controlled. You will feel this most clearly in the way they respond to your becoming. When you speak a new truth, they listen. When you set a boundary, they respect it. When you step into a new version of yourself, they don't mourn the old, they celebrate the shift. That's how you know the love is real, because it is not attached to who you were. It is in awe of who you are becoming. And in turn, you do the same for them. You don't cling to the familiar version of who they were when you met. You don't freeze them in time. You allow them to evolve. And you do not take their growth personally. You do not say, "You've changed," as an accusation. You say it as a recognition, because you want them to change. You want them to rise. And in their rising, you rise too. This is what makes the connection feel alive. It never stagnates. It never becomes a prison. You are not caged in comfort. You are moved by clarity. You are invited to step forward again and again, and the beauty is, you are not pushed or pulled. You are inspired, and that is the difference. You don't grow because you're afraid of losing them. You grow because you feel seen enough to finally be who you really are. There is no keeping score, no emotional debt. You don't carry the weight of their healing, and they don't carry yours, but you witness it. You hold space for it. You remind each other who you truly are when the world makes you forget. And through that remembrance, the growth becomes sacred, shared, empowering. Sometimes growth means change. Sometimes it means letting go of old beliefs, old habits, old ways of reacting. And in a lesser connection, those shifts would create distance. But in the right one, they create depth. Because both of you understand, love is not about staying the same. It's about becoming more true. And yes, there will be discomfort. You will trigger each other, not because you're toxic, but because you are human. But even your triggers are transformed when the love is conscious. They become invitations, not threats. You don't lash out and run, you breathe and reflect. And in that reflection, growth takes root. It doesn't bloom overnight, but it blooms inevitably. There will be times when your healing paths cross jagged edges. You may struggle to communicate. You may shut down. But the bond doesn't break under pressure, it adjusts. It pauses, it waits, it reopens. That is the beauty of shared growth. It doesn't demand perfection. It asks only for presence, for honesty, for humility. And you'll notice something else: your dreams begin to expand. Not because they are responsible for them, but because their belief in you becomes a silent wind at your back. You begin to imagine more for yourself, to want more from life, and not from greed, but from alignment. You start saying yes to things you once feared, and it's not because they made you brave, it's because their presence reminded you that you always were. That's when you know, when your life is growing not just around them, but because of how deeply you are allowed to be yourself with them. You are not edited, you are not contained, you are free, and in that freedom you become powerful, not over them, but over your own choices, your own energy, your own becoming. So when someone is meant for you, look at how your life responds. Look at how you treat yourself when they're near. Look at how much of your truth you allow to rise. That's the measure, not how loud the connection is, not how intense, but how alive you feel in your own skin. If you feel expanded, not reduced. If you feel supported, not steered. If you feel met, not managed, you're not just in love, you're in growth, and that is the love that lasts, not because it avoids change, but because it welcomes it. You are not here to find someone who keeps you safe from evolution. You are here to walk with someone who ignites it. And in that shared fire, you both become who you were always meant to be, not copies of one another, but reflections of truth in motion. And the most powerful part is this: the growth you share doesn't end with you. It ripples into your work, your creativity, your presence in the world. It elevates everything. Because when love is aligned, it does not only lift hearts, it lifts lives. And as it lifts, something strange and beautiful begins to unfold, something that seems to defy all logic, all planning, all structure. What once felt out of reach, what once seemed mistimed, what once felt like an inconvenient crossing of paths, suddenly aligns. Not because you forced it, not because you waited with clenched fists for the universe to deliver it to your door, but because you stepped fully into your own readiness, and they stepped fully into theirs. And when that happens, time becomes your servant, not your master. You've spent enough of your life trying to force timing, trying to chase the right moment, trying to get ahead or hold on to what you feared would pass you by. But now you realize timing doesn't need to be controlled when alignment is real. It meets you in the very moment. You are no longer trying to manipulate it. You're not begging life to hurry anymore. You're not looking backward, aching over what you think you missed. You are present, and it's in that presence that time bends. When someone is meant for you, the moment finds you both, not just geographically, not just emotionally, but in maturity, in readiness, in capacity. You both arrive not perfect, but willing, not complete, but open, and the magic of that shared openness makes all the so-called delays finally make sense. You no longer mourn what didn't happen sooner. You understand now why it couldn't. Because had it happened then, when you were still afraid of your own power, when they were still running from their own shadow, when your boundaries were still built from fear instead of love, it wouldn't have lasted. It would have collapsed under the weight of unprepared hearts. But now, the weight is no longer burden, it is foundation. There is a sacred rhythm to real connection, and it honors the silent work done in solitude. It honors the chapters you lived apart, the nights you cried alone, the times you thought you missed your chance. All of it was part of the alignment, not a punishment, not a delay. It was preparation. The world has taught you to fear missed timing, that if it doesn't happen when you want it, it's gone forever. But the truth is, what is meant for you is not only marked by inner certainty or effortless connection, not only reflected in mutual growth. It is also unmistakable in timing. Because when you are truly ready, and they are truly ready, the paths that once ran parallel begin to converge without force, without drama, without delay. This is not the kind of alignment you measure in calendars. It is not based on birthdays, ages, or milestones. It is not about whether you met in your 20s or 30s or beyond. It is about the now that exists between two people who have stopped performing and started being. That moment is outside of time, and yet it reorders time itself. You might have met them before, maybe years ago, maybe when everything was wrong, when you couldn't yet see them clearly, or they couldn't see themselves. And you thought, if only, but if only belongs to a mind that thinks it must make life happen, not to a soul that trusts life is already unfolding. If you meet again, it's not by chance. It's because time finally matched what the spirit already knew. And if you meet for the first time, it's not luck. It's because every thread, every loss, every misstep was guiding you here. Every no that broke your heart was protecting this yes. And you wouldn't have recognized it before. You wouldn't have had the eyes to see, the hands to hold, the heart to carry it. You know you've arrived at alignment when you stop rushing. You don't need to hurry love along. You're no longer anxious to secure it, to define it, to lock it into place. You're not afraid of losing it because you know you didn't manufacture it. You met it, you matched it, you surrendered to it, and anything that arises from that surrender does not vanish in silence or crumble under pause. It breathes with you. Time in this kind of union feels expansive. Days feel like months. Minutes stretch with depth. And yet, years may pass with no urgency, because you understand that what's real does not rush to prove itself. The connection becomes timeless because it was never rooted in time to begin with. It was rooted in truth, and truth has no deadline. You stop saying things like, "We're behind," or "This should have happened by now." You realize there is no should. When it comes to love that's aligned, you see how every detour was a divine reroute, every heartbreak an excavation, every waiting period a gestation. Something was forming in you both that could only meet when the soil was rich enough to sustain it. So when you finally meet them in the now, not a desperate now, but a full, steady now, everything clicks. Not because the world says it makes sense, maybe it doesn't. Maybe the logistics are messy, maybe the past is complicated. But inside you, there is no resistance. You've both done enough inner clearing to stop fighting what flows. You're no longer haunted by the need to control. You trust what unfolds. Even challenges don't shake you like they once did. Because now, timing isn't your enemy, it's your ally. You don't see delays as punishments. You see them as pauses with purpose. You trust the slow burn. You embrace the long game. And when they say, "I need time," you don't panic. You listen. You know that true connection doesn't fear the unfolding. It welcomes it.